What about making yours sound better?
Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about Ableton Live and how to get started producing with the software. Ableton is an incredibly robust DAW, or digital audio workstation, that enables you to do things with music and audio that musicians in the past could only dream of. However, being so robust makes it pretty complicated and it can seem pretty overwhelming at first. Today, I'll go over the main features and give you my tips on how to hit the ground running when starting with Ableton. It would be impossible to discuss all of the amazing capabilities, features, and settings included in Ableton Live, but after watching this video, you should have a solid foundation to start on. First, you'll need to get the DAW. When purchasing Ableton, you'll notice there are 3 editions: Intro, Standard, and Suite. You can also download a free trial of Ableton Suite for 30 days if you haven't quite made the decision to purchase yet. Which version you choose will depend on your budget as well as your needs. If you don't have a lot of cash to spend, you might want to opt for the Intro version. However, the Suite comes with a ton more instruments, effects, and capabilities. You're really pretty limited when it comes to the Intro version, but hey, it's a lot better than nothing. Most importantly, I would recommend Suite for the instruments and effects that it comes with. If you can learn and get comfortable with the instruments and effects that natively come with Ableton, you'll be off to a great start and well on your way to becoming an excellent producer. Alright, so now that you have your copy of Ableton Live downloaded and installed, I know it's tempting to jump right in and start playing with the instruments and effects. However, first I would recommend editing the preferences and settings. These options are up to you, of course, but I'll tell you some of my recommendations. I went through years of trial and error before I discovered what some of these preferences and options can do, and I know I wish I was aware of them from the start. I won't go through each and every setting, but I'll show you the ones that are the most important. In the look and feel section, you can adjust the various options that affect the DAW's appearance. While this may seem purely cosmetic, making sure the DAW's look and feel settings are set up the way you want can be an important part of your organization and workflow. Here, you can choose if and how tracks and clips are assigned colors, and in this area you can adjust the overall appearance of the DAW. Lastly, in this area you can choose the behavior of your plugin windows. I usually leave multiple plugin windows on because I often want to adjust multiple plugins at the same time, but that's just personal preference. I also usually leave auto hide turned on because otherwise it will leave open your plugin windows even if you select a different track, which for me gets a little too hectic. The audio section is where you'll set up your audio inputs and outputs. You can also select your sample rate, which I typically leave at the lowest setting since that's CD quality anyway. However, you can do your own research to see if you want it higher. Also, buffer size is very important. If your CPU is having trouble keeping up with your project, turning up the size of the buffer can help with that. Ideally, you want this setting to be as low as possible without it causing your computer to glitch out. You can test this setting by turning on the test tone and simulating different levels of CPU usage. If it starts to sound glitchy, you may want to increase your buffer size. The file folder section is very important to your organization. First, you'll see that you can save the current set as default. I highly suggest trying to develop your own template set based on your organization strategy and frequently use instruments, effects, and plugins. That way you can dive right into working as soon as you load the program rather than having to find and load your various instruments and effects each time. Over time, the template will evolve and improve as you get more comfortable with different tools. I also suggest leaving Create Analysis File on. With this setting on, Ableton will create an analysis file each time you import an audio file, meaning that the next time the project loads or you use this file, it will not have to be analyzed again and will be ready to use immediately. The Record, Warp, Launch section contains settings that will affect the way you use Ableton. In Record, you can choose the type of file that Ableton creates when you're recording, as well as the bit depth and some other settings that affect recording behavior. Warping is an important breakthrough effect that Ableton created to adjust the tempo and stretching of audio files. I typically leave auto warping for short samples on, but leave it off for long samples. This is because Ableton usually does a good job on warping short samples like the kick drum or drum loops, but often isn't very accurate when importing an entire song or something longer like that, so I'd rather just do that myself. I also personally leave the default warp mode to complex because I find that it works better on more types of audio files. And if necessary, I can always change this after importing the audio file. When I first started with Ableton, I had no idea about these 2 settings and it made my life a lot more difficult. I couldn't quite figure out why all my imported files sounded weird until I realized that the default beat setting is designed more for drums. I definitely recommend getting a good handle on warping as it's super important when using Ableton, and I'll discuss it a little bit further later in the video. Next, I'm going to show you some important tips when saving and exporting your projects. When working on a project, you'll likely use various files that are stored in different areas of your computer. These can be files stored in different folders of your computer, audio that you recorded in, things like that. I highly recommend that in addition to saving normally on a regular basis, on occasion you should select Collect All and Save on your project. This will take all of those files from the various places on your computer and put them into the project folder. That way, if you delete that file from the original location, or you move it, or you're trying to send the project to someone else, all the files are now with the project file, and Ableton won't have trouble loading the various audio. When you're exporting a project, you've got a lot of options. I recommend reading up on the different types of files, as well as quality settings, to ensure that your exported file is up to par for your needs. You can also choose to export stems as individual tracks, or only selected items from here. If you select an area of the project, only that area will be exported, so be aware of that. Live's interface is unique and can be used for both live and studio purposes. The session view is great for sketching out ideas, incorporating different parts, and seeing how they can fit together. You can create clips in this area and loop them. You can then mix and match different clips. And when you have something you like, you can transfer them over to the arrangement view, where you'll arrange them in more of a traditional timeline fashion. Down here are your options for input and recording, and at the bottom are your overall controls for the track. You can arm the track to record if it's an audio track, or you can arm a MIDI track to play if you're using a MIDI controller. You'll notice that the arrangement view has the same controls, but they're aligned in a horizontal format. Up here are the looping options, and you can control the area you want to loop by stretching these arrows. In this area, you'll find the various recording options. I would take a few minutes to learn about each of these buttons and how they differ from the main recording button. In the top left, you can adjust the tempo of your project as well as the time signature and metronome. You can also tap the tap button to adjust the tempo by ear. Like I mentioned, there are two types of tracks, MIDI and audio. MIDI tracks are where you load instruments to play or draw in notes, while audio tracks are where you can use audio files or record in live instruments. Audio effects work on either kind of track. While MIDI effects only work on MIDI tracks. You can view a track's contents by double-clicking the track, or you can view a single clip's contents by double-clicking the clip. In the track view, you can load instruments and effects by double-clicking or dragging. Audio is routed from left to right, so the order you put them in matters. Click here to turn on or off the item, and here to open up a third-party plugins interface. You can also create send and return tracks in Ableton. You can use them to send a track through an effect chain without altering the original signal. This is great for time-based effects like reverb and delay, where you want the original sound to still play, but wish to add an echo or reverb as well. Usually, you don't put these types of effects directly on the track, or else it will wash the original sound out. When starting out, I recommend leaving the info view window open. It will tell you what the various items do whenever you scroll over them. This can be very helpful in learning the various aspects of the software, especially the parts that I'm not going to go over today. In Live 10, you can toggle automation view by pressing A. This is a little different to previous versions of Ableton, so if you have Live 9 or earlier, you should be able to see the automation without pressing anything. Automation is how you adjust parameters over the course of time. You can perform automation on a track or group like this, and choose which parameter you're adjusting by either clicking the parameter or choosing it from this menu. As I mentioned, you can create groups in Ableton. This is great for organizational purposes. As you can see here, I have my groups separated by type of instrument. This also helps if you want to add effects or processing to multiple instruments at once. Now, in Ableton 10, you can even create groups within groups, which is super helpful when you get to some advanced layering. Ableton comes with some amazing instruments and effects, especially if you have the Suite edition. I highly recommend starting here before you invest in any third-party plugins. Each of these instruments and effects could use their own walkthrough video, so I won't go too into detail. But if you're able to get a good grasp of each of these, you'll have no problem working with most other software instruments and plugins. Each instrument and effect comes with a ton of presets as well, which often sound great, but also are really awesome tools to help you see how the sounds were created. The first important feature I'll discuss is warping. Warping can be hard to grasp at first, but is an essential feature when learning Ableton. In the sample window, there are many parameters related to warping. Each of the yellow boxes are called warp markers, and they can be placed strategically to bend and stretch the sound, based on the BPM you select here or which direction you stretch the marker in. The warp mode affects the way the warping is done, and the different modes should be used on different kinds of sounds. You can then choose various looping options and transpose the key of the clip, reverse it, and various other options. When a clip is unwarped, the length of the clip will change when transposing. But when it is warped, the timing remains the same. Also, a warped clip will slow down or speed up along with the tempo of the project, whereas an unwarped clip will stay at its original BPM no matter what. I recommend you studying warping in depth as it is very important. Capturing and sequencing MIDI is also super important. You can record in a MIDI performance by arming the track and clicking record. You can also draw in your MIDI in the clip window. The piano roll to the left is there so you know which notes you are playing. You can adjust the length of MIDI notes and the velocity of them as well. Click this little headphone icon so that you can hear the notes when you click or drag them. You can also click fold to only show the notes that are included in this clip. You can change the view of the grid in either a clip or in the arrangement by right-clicking and selecting your preferred option. You can automate the parameters within a clip by clicking this button and selecting the parameter. To conclude, I'll leave you with some of my final tips to help you when you're getting started with Ableton. I know there's a lot to learn, but if you follow these tips, you'll be off to a great start. First, keep organized. Color code your tracks and group them by instrument type, or in a way that works for your workflow. Keep your plugins and samples in folders that are organized with purpose. Ableton 10 also has a new collections feature where you can tag items with different colors and they will be organized into designated folders that you can pull up at any time. Give yourself limitations. Oftentimes, especially when starting, having too many choices can make getting started and, more importantly, finishing a project very difficult. Start by giving yourself limits. Try making a song with only 10 tracks, or better yet, 4. Or try making a song using only Ableton's operator instrument. These limitations will push you to improve and make each sound the best it can possibly be. Plus, you'll get a lot more comfortable with the limited tools you'll use. Next, don't try to learn everything at once. Have a strategy and focus on the most important areas first. When in doubt, do the research. If something is frustrating you, there's probably an easier way to do it. Or maybe you don't quite understand why something is happening. The internet is a great resource for these kind of challenges. Lastly, have fun. Remember, this isn't a sprint to the finish. Don't get frustrated that your tracks aren't sounding professional at the beginning. Enjoy the process and be sure to celebrate every small accomplishment. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it and subscribe to our channel.